But I can go over it later.
Sure. And John Sasso was nice enough to come up with a couple of slides there.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah. Oh, Michael's there. Hello, Mike. Is Ron on yet?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Hey, we gotta have our clerk.
Got my notes filed, ready to go.
Great.
The obligatory dog in the background for Zoom.
So we're waiting for, what's he? Betty and Mark?
Mark's here.
Oh, Mark's here. Okay.
Mark's there.
And John, did Betty reach out to you? John O'Neill, did Betty reach out to you?
No, she did not. Bill Brown did, but Betty did not.
So slightly different. Yeah, so Betty had shared with me that she is planning to resign from the group. I don't know, and I requested that she talk to you, but apparently she has not. So I don't think she's coming. I'm pretty sure she's not coming.
Did you indicate why?
Yeah, maybe we should get when we're in session.
Okay, sure. Yep, right. All right, so is the other John here? John Parsons.
John Parsons is there, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's call the meeting to order, and we'll do roll call. So just so we'll officially record who's here. And so Ron Assini.
Present.
Michael Coltman.
I'm here, thank you.
Mark Doxter.
Is here.
John O'Neill is here. John Parsons.
Here.
John Sasso.
Presence.
And Elizabeth Walsh is absent. Okay. The first item is approval of the minutes of our first meeting on December 13th. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move that we accept the minutes.
Okay, so Michael Coltman will accept the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additions, corrections, or deletions? Seeing none, all in favor?
We have to roll call that too.
Roll call. Thank you for reminding me. So Ron Assini.
Approved.
Michael Coltman.
Approved.
Mark Doxer.
Approved.
John Parsons.
Approved.
John Sasso.
Approve.
John O'Neill. Approved. So the minutes are approved as submitted unanimously. And then Jean, do we have an update as far as the securing of a consultant?
Thank you. Yes, we do. Thanks, everybody. We have a invitation for bids. We've met with the purchasing department folks. Kevin and I had a good meeting with them. The advertisements will be put out there next week. And the due date is, I'm not going to remember exactly the date, but it's the end of January this is for consultant services for planning and community outreach around RECAL, the fun acronym that everybody likes so much. The the Reading Center for Active Living is what we're calling this project for anyone who's not that familiar and on the call. The Center for Active Living is the reference to the next iteration of the Pleasant Street Center. And it's currently undefined as to whether or not that would be a senior center or a intergenerational community center. And that's really the purpose of having this planning process, and mostly based in community engagement, is to reach out into the community and get the pulse of the community on what the community feels they could get behind before we start going in one direction or another. We'll have this feedback to guide us. So I'm very pleased that the scope of work was approved by this group, and everybody's on board, and we did that a couple of weeks ago. And now we're moving forward with what's called invitation for bids, and that's procurement jargon for we have to follow the rules and advertise and open it up to consultants. There were a few that were on the state bid list. Some of them I reached out to that I've worked with in the past to see if there was a more expeditious way to avoid the procurement process of 3 or 4 weeks. And after I did some preliminary work with reaching out, I realized it's an uncertain time, and I think the town would be better served to just put it out there, see what we get for bids. I do have a couple more appointments with potential consultants next week to see if we could maybe instill some interest in the consulting community so that people would be interested in responding. Some consultants that we've worked with in the past may be interested, but I didn't want to hold up the process in hopes of that. So I thought just getting it going would be the best bet. So that's where we're at, and hope to have more to report in the next meeting. Thank you
very much, Jean. Now, according to Mark, Betty had reached out to him about wishing to resign. And I knew she was unhappy, and that's to me is part of the difficulty with the Zoom thing. If she had been present, I would have talked to her after the meeting to try to, get a better understanding of where she was coming from. But Mark, did she tell you what?
So we had a little back and forth. The essence of it is she was concerned that we're focusing more on kind of more surveys and not kind of attacking the problem directly and kind of moving things forward. I'd say that was one piece. And I think the other piece was thinking about things like housing and other aspects that I think to her are very, very important. And she didn't feel like we were going to be addressing those, and kind of in summary said, hey, I don't think this thing is for me.
Okay. Even though we have the agenda, I think it highlights something that I think I would, if people will bear with me, harken back to our charge, because I've read it so many times now. And I know, especially for people who go to the senior center, have partaken of the activities, see its limitations, it has to be very frustrating to hear about a planning process. But that is what our charge is. It's to, as Jean had indicated, it's to document the needs to see if the 2017 studies documentation of needs still holds true. Are there other things that have changed since then? And can we make a case and find out whether the community agrees with the case we may be making, that there's a need for expanded activities, a new physical facility for activities, not only for seniors, but might other age groups in the community be interested in the community center? Is that is what other people's understanding is of what our charge is? Because I'm thinking the council, some of the things that Betty was interested in as far as two different things. Housing certainly is a major issue for elders, but that's not our charge. Transportation, major issue. Transportation to go to a center, that would be part of our, part of what I think we would be getting into, or the survey would be looking at. But I don't want to go any further along that line, and we're going to, we will get on to discussing the information that people have been given, sent out. If we can't if there are more people who have the reservations that Betty had, and if there are, I'd like to talk about that right up front so that we can see if we can get beyond that and come to a way forward that everybody's comfortable with. So I'm looking, anyone who might want to.
Yeah, I'll chime in, John,
Okay.
because I know I was a bit outspoken about this last time, so maybe I caused some of that consternation. I guess just to talk about the two specific concerns Betty raised. It's interesting because I had reread the report in prep for this meeting as well, and while the study done back in 2015, 2016 did solicit information from the community about how affordability and housing and whatnot, there actually were no recommendations whatsoever about that particular issue in that report. And again, I'm not suggesting that it isn't important, but to your point, it's a much broader issue that I believe is well beyond the scope of this particular committee. And really, there's very much the only thing that's even tangentially related to it, I think, was the recommendation to provide more opportunity for seniors to work off some of their tax debt, so to speak, as part of volunteerism. So I think that whole issue is. I think someone actually mentioned it the last time. It is a much broader scope issue, and certainly not within the purview of what this particular committee was intended. As far as the second point is concerned, I guess I kind of walked into this committee hoping that we might have an opportunity as part of the process, as part of surveying what's going on, and to establish some of the needs. And an example of what I shared earlier today was a spreadsheet to really lay out, well, how much space do we need and where are things going on. I think that serves as an important opportunity for us to present this information back to the appropriate people, whether it's Council on Aging or Elder and Human Services, and to say, okay, our charter isn't to implement anything new per se, but it might provide some really good insight to them. There may be things in there that we, as a voice to town meeting, can bring forth even before. As part of this process, we've put together a plan. We have our ideas about what this Center for Active Living might look like in the future. But we also want to share that I think there's an enormous frustration on the part of the community that, there are things that potentially we could do. And I think it's helpful if we can pull some things out of our process that, again, give them to the right people. I guess we're not the right people to implement them regardless, but potentially as a way to provide some input and feedback on that. I guess that's my point. And I certainly hope that's something that we can pull out of this and that, we can keep in scope. But if not, then, so be it. I don't want to at least not have that conversation. And then if someone says, well, why didn't you do that? Say, well, it was out of scope. I'm happy to say that conversation and say, then we need to have some other discussion about what that should be. So to those 2 points, that's my comments and answers on that.
Great. Yeah, Mark.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John and John. So back to your questions, John O'Neill, also, I think that the charter here there are two things. One is to kind of understand the needs, and related to the needs are programs, activities, generational aspects, things like that. That's kind of part one. And part two, I think, relates to facilities. And what types of facilities would we recommend in order to best work with those needs? And facilities is broader than just a building. It's, I just was scribbling down, access, capabilities, capacity. And think about this kind of, I think there's a longer term aspect to it in terms of, what do we need that we might not be able to have access to right away, but it takes time to get there. And there could be some shorter horizon things that we could do potentially also while we're getting to that longer term one. But I think that's our charters, is kind of the needs side and the facilities side.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
This is Mike. I was rereading the charter and also some of the things that you sent out, John, and it does seem like there's two parts to what we're being asked to figure out in the programs, and whatever can be done near term, medium term, or long term, figure that out. But I think much more throughout the whole report was implications about the physical space, not facilitating the programs, not facilitating the staff needs and the ability of the staff to work efficiently together to accomplish new programs or new initiatives. So I really think that the purpose of this, it seemed to me that the purpose of the committee was to really think about what the physical building and what other facilities in town are really important to a center for aging or a community.
Okay.
If I could say something,
Yeah, sure.
I think the Council on Aging, just about everybody there would say the only thing, or maybe not the only thing, but about the main thing is just get out of that building as fast as we can.
Okay.
It just doesn't have enough room. You have somebody with a wheelchair who wants to use a restroom, they've got to get themselves onto an elevator. Either they go to the basement or go to the second floor. I mean, the building just doesn't cut it at all. And I think pretty much everybody on the council would agree with me that that's got to be the main focus, or what we consider should be the main focus of this group.
Okay. Appreciate that. I think we can do, I had talked the last time about parallel process, in response to John Sasso. And I don't think there's disagreement. I think John Parsons, and I wish Betty was still with us, is that we need to demonstrate, we have to actually have facts and figures that back up the need, and I don't think that's going to be that hard to do, and I think the surveys of people that now participate, and I think when we get to talk about, that's one of the reasons why I also had asked first Amy O'Brien, but she's been out ill. And so Kevin was very good about coming up with, I said, what are some of the things that they would have liked to have done at the senior center, but couldn't do because of that physical facility, the building itself. Because I think that's the sort of thing that is part of what, very germane to what our charge is. And in doing that, we also do get into some of the things that don't have to wait. And I think that's when we can address some of the things that John Sasso was talking about. There are some things that we know, like dissemination of information. A lot of people don't even know what the what's offered at the Pleasant Street Center now. So there are some things I think we're going to be able to do right away. I don't think it's going to be a long process. But to John, John Parsons, to your point, I don't think we're going to find any disagreement that the building doesn't work for the need. But we have to take some steps to actually document that, because we want to make sure that everybody in the community, or as many people as possible in the community, agree with that. So that, in fact, because it's going to take some money and some resources from the town, and there are competing interests. And so we want to be able to say, this is very important to a sizable and growing population of the community. So I think both things come together. But given that, I will go back to the agenda and the service needs and if I will call your attention to what John Sasso came up with as a summary from the study of the 2017 Community Needs Assessment.
Can I just interject for 1 second?
Sure.
John, sorry. So just with regards to Betty, I mean, I kind of feel like the committee, I'll use these terms and then you guys can correct me, is somewhat committed to not only address the issue of a long-term solution, but potentially make some recommendations and ideas about things in the short term. My perspective, just based on what I heard just now, is that she was concerned that we weren't going to do anything about that, and that would be a concern. So is it worth going back to her and saying, we stick with us and see if this is able to give you some confidence that we will get there, we will actually use, and then if in the end she doesn't feel it's the right perspective, then that's fine. But just a thought. Your call.
I will call her because I think that's a good thought. And I think she has a lot to offer. And even, one of the points that she raised is one of the things that's the need for a private space. One, that she as a social worker volunteered, and they couldn't even accept her volunteer, offer because there wasn't a space to be able to have, privacy for people. So, and just some of the other things that she expressed, she does have some really valuable information for the group. So it'd be a shame to, so I will call her, contact her and see if we can bring her back on board. Okay, so now taking a look at the recommendations, I think just if John, you wanted to highlight them, and then we'll take a look at what's the situation now? Is anything changed?
Yeah. Let me, if you don't mind, just quickly, I just wanted to walk through. And so what I did, I very simply, I went back into the report. I looked through the whole report, but I focused primarily on the recommendations and conclusions. And there are, can you put the slides up on the screen just so we can talk to them? Is that something you can do, John? Or can I do it?
I don't. Kevin? Is Kevin?
Yep. Let me see if I have.
I can share screen.
Yeah, I'll get it. If you have it, I just opened it so I can do it as well.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So just again, very high level, I wanted to go back and look at the report. The recommendations that were made, there were 6. This is how they broke it up. 6 key areas. The first one related to accessibility of the Pleasant Street Center itself as it stands now. Again, I heard the comment, well, we want to get out of Pleasant Street, but again, it'd be interesting to note, what sort of charter they had at the time, whether their charter was to kind of make do with what you can and make recommendations around it, or whether, the sky was the limit, give us your best plan. I don't know. So keeping that in mind, this is again, what was in the report. Again, improving accessibility of the center. I call the second one communication, which is, letting people know about the programs and services. The third thing I call partnerships, which is continue to find ways to benefit from things that are going on elsewhere in the community. The property tax item was a specific individual recommendation to provide property tax work-off options for seniors. The fifth one, which really focuses on space as a whole, really talks about expanding the space and the ability for the community to get better access. This recommendation, just as an FYI, also included the staffing piece. So it just the way they organized it, recommendations for additional staff fell under space. And programming, which was the last piece, was really to look at what the programming was, if there are better ways to improve it, how could one diversify it, as well as look at what the needs of the community are. This programming one also included transportation as an FYI, so that transportation was a sub recommendation under programming. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. There was affordability from a housing perspective discussed during the needs assessment, but there were no conclusions or recommendations made to specifically address this issue. I know Jean added the housing thing to the chart. absolutely. I think we even mentioned that it's really outside the scope of what we're doing. But it was actually mentioned, and there was a session held on it during the needs assessment. So what I agreed to do this week was to take the programming section and kind of flesh that out a bit more. This is the next level down of recommendations that came out of the programming. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I do want to point out again, as I said, that there was this bullet about evaluating the needs for expanded transportation services. From my perspective, for the moment, I'd like to kind of table that piece because it really, there's a lot of things that impact that, where it is, how the services are organized. I think it's certainly an important issue. I almost think it belongs in its own issue, to be honest with you. But I did want to at least mention that it was, again, an underpinning of the programming recommendation. Obviously, part and parcel with getting people to wherever a program may be is transportation. So the other four main programming recommendations, again, you can read them. They're in the report. I took two things out, and maybe other people may view this differently. There were really two common themes in all of those recommendations. The first one was resource sharing. That in every one of those recommendations, there was something that talked about a partnership, either with the schools, with surrounding communities, with other third-party program providers. Again, I don't know if that was part of their charter to say that, we should look at that because this is what we can do today, or if that truly was something that they believed was a way to accomplish everything. And then the other common theme was really to reduce isolation of seniors, I'll use the words address mental health. And this related to not just the seniors themselves, but their caregivers. Obviously there was a specific one in there about adult day health, communications, having that one-on-one or multi-person communication. So these are two things that I kind of pulled out from those recommendations. Others may read them differently, but I think that was an interesting piece. After I read through it again, I looked at each one of them and I was like, wow, these things show up in all of them. So again, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot more time on this, but I thought it was important to kind of recalibrate what was actually done during that needs assessment and what specific things related to programming were identified. The only other thing I wanted to do real quick, John, is just show I don't know if you got the Excel sheet I sent. Just give me a second here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to have to reshare my screen. So in addition to that, what I then did, and I know, John, you sent out, or Kevin sent out a spreadsheet that had information about current activities. I was actually looking at this a lot more detailed in some respects, that I actually thought for us to really get to a needs assessment for the community, we really needed to know, well, what are the programs or activities or services that need or want to be offered? And then kind of flush out, how often are these things happening? What's the current participation? How many people are they really hoping to be able to serve? Where's it currently located? What's the current space in terms of square footage? What do they think the needed space would be? What sort of internal, external staff? What sort of cost of that, not cost to the senior, but cost to the community, the town? What are we charging seniors? Are there any special considerations? Are these programs or things offered somewhere else? If we really want to do a good needs assessment of this particular issue from a programming perspective, I think we need to get down to this level of detail. And that's my perspective. You guys can agree or disagree. But if we really want to be able to, at the end of the day, to say, well, we need 30,000 square feet of space. Well, show me the details, show me the programs and the spaces and the pieces that we need to get to that. Or to your point, well, maybe there's a program that's being offered in the next community over, and it's something that we could actually take advantage of. We can go look at and talk to you about. Until we kind of really flush out the details of this, and maybe some of that was in the Excel sheet that got sent out. I only looked at it briefly. I think that would be really important to do. Okay, I'm gonna unfortunately I'm gonna have to drop off for 1 second. But I was kind of done with my spiel anyhow. I will be back in 1 second. I apologize.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
Thanks, John. So I'll have to repeat this when John comes back on. I think that, you know, some of kind of that level of detail and discussion on programs will be helpful, but I want to be careful here. So based on the last report, look, the Council on Aging is taking, you know, steps and trying to establish things in kind of current activities that can exist. I think what we're missing, and one of the things we need to think about, is to really understand the needs and kind of what's missing, if you will. And it's not as easy as just kind of saying, you know, hey, you know, how many more bridge tables should be set up? I think we need to do some benchmarking. I think we need to see what's going on elsewhere. I think we need to understand why Reading seniors who are more mobile, in some cases, will go to other towns and other facilities. And why? I want to understand why. I think that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for. And you know what? There might be opportunities to share that, you know, I don't think every community has to have exactly the same thing, but it's kind of like, you know, what are we not doing? And so the people that go now is a measure. I think we're trying to figure out, you know, what is it that we should have that will encourage the community to get together, to want to be part of the Reading community, the Reading, I don't want to call it the senior community, the 60 plus community, whatever we want to call it that way. And I think we need to kind of figure out what some of that stuff is. And John Parsons can answer a lot of these much better than I, but, you know, for example, there are a number of more physically oriented activities that just can't take place at Pleasant Street. Today, there's already too much demand for them and it doesn't fit. So, and there are, you know, plenty of issues like that. We need to learn a little bit more about that stuff. So John Sasser, you're back. Sorry, I was just kind of coming around with some comments on things.
That's okay.
I want to be careful. I think we need to understand the needs first, see what other communities are doing, do some benchmarking, see kind of what it is we're not able to do that would kind of get more people to come, as opposed to just kind of assume that we can take account right away. I think we can't get that count yet. I don't think that that's kind of given us what we need. I was taking the example of some of the more physical activities like Zumba. There are already more people that would want to do Zumba than we can accommodate, period. How many would do it if we could, you know, have more space? I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I'm not sure that a single survey necessarily answers that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How can we get that assessment? I think benchmarking is part of it in other places. I think understanding why people currently in our community go to other senior centers around us. I think learning more about kind of what's available, what might happen, kind of, you know, aiming a little bit toward the future, making sure that we have our sight set that way also. Those are the pieces that I think I want to make sure we're going to gather.
Okay, anybody else as far as, you know?
Something, if
You
I
mean-
could just
yeah.
quickly, a
Yep.
thought that's floating around in my head. The Zumba is great, the bridge is great, but what's really, really important for people to understand in the community is the work that's done by the caseworker and the work that's done by the nurse. And that doesn't really show up except in one of the surveys we had sometime in the past 5 years. I think Jane Burns ran one where it showed how many people each one of those women see every week, every day, you know, throughout the year. And when you read the pleasantries, you read the other stuff, you see all the kind of fun activities. But the real crux of what's so important is the work that those two people do, the caseworker and the nurse.
That's why I had asked for some of their data from those two positions, John, and that is included. Kevin did include that. I don't know if you got to look at that, because I know there was a lot of what I thought was just a couple of pages. When my printer was printing out, all of a sudden on both sides, I got multiple pages. And one of them included the number of clients being seen by those two people. But
I had a little bit of jet lag from coming back, and
No,
I didn't read
no.
what Kevin put out today.
Yeah, no, it just came out, middle of the day today or early afternoon. So
And I'm happy to go through some of that if you'd like.
sure. Oh, well, first of all, I want to see if there is more reaction to the discussion that we were having. Anybody else? Yes, Michael.
So, I really appreciated the presentation, the PowerPoint that John put together, and the spreadsheets that Kevin sent out this afternoon, I guess. One of the things that I was thinking about is the need for the particular space need for collaborative space for the staff to be able to talk to one another and make sure that the nurse and the social workers are coordinating with the rec people and the other people. And I don't see how that gets done in where everybody's spread out. Or there are a lot of advantages to having co-location. And that's one of the big problems with space. And I don't think that necessarily is going to come out in a survey of programs, needs, and that sort of thing. And the other point that I would like to make is that I think it's very important to think of programs that are going to get people to come to the center, the community center, probably across a larger age spectrum than we've been talking about sometimes, to get rid of the stigma of, I don't want to go to the senior center because that's just for seniors who need help. And I think that's an important part of programming.
Okay.
Zumba, dancing, yoga, all those other things are key. But I don't know whether there are other facilities in town that could facilitate all that stuff that could get coordinated. But thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are we ready then for Kevin to walk us through some of the materials that he sent out?
Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up anyway, so we'll proceed. So Kevin, if you will be so kind.
All right. I like pictures. So I'm going to share some pictures first that I didn't send out to the group.
Okay.
Everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is the biggest thing that is missing in our center. A place for people to gather, sit down, have a cup of coffee, and just chat. The social isolation has been the biggest problem in the past 2 years since I've been there. But overall, I think, as John summarized, the last item on his third slide there was reduce isolation. This is from a center that I recently visited, and it's just a beautiful, welcoming, warm space. And again, somewhere where people can gather, have a cup of coffee, sit, chat, get ready for the next activity. Right now, we're actually requesting people, don't show up early because we don't have any place for you to sit. Part of that's COVID. Part of it is just, again, the space. We do not have the room. A real exercise room. Right now, people are exercising on hard concrete, the same place that the trucks parked 140 years ago. This provides a little more cushion, a little more give to our old bodies. I mean, I wouldn't want to exercise on the tile at the Pleasant Street Center. You know, we talk about how do we get the 50-year-olds in? I think John O'Neill mentioned 2 weeks ago. You know, how do we get people to come in their 50s to the whatever center we want to call it, and then have them transition into the other activities as they age. You know, having a real exercise room. I know the center I took these from, they have interns from colleges that come in and help people, show them how to use them. So that's one way of getting people in and keeping them. You know, we talk about office space. Right now, people are spread out in 1, 2, 3, 4 different spaces. Nobody can talk to each other over at the senior center. And again, how do we get the younger people in? Have a real kitchen, have real meals. One of the items that, again, on the slides that John Sasso put together, you know, expand the congregate meals. Again, we haven't been able to do that since we opened this past June, but we never got a big turnout. We had the meals provided by Mystic Valley Elder Services. And I hate to say it, they haven't been missed because they were not very good. But to have a real kitchen like this and have a real staff that can provide quality meals, maybe not every day, but 3 days a week. And it can potentially be a revenue source as well. So those are just a few things, you know, what if we go to a new center? All right, let me stop that. Then I'll go to the spreadsheets that I sent out to you. Okay. Again, these are all extracts from what we use over at the Pleasant Street Center. And the program is called My Senior Center. And I can't vouch 100% for the accuracy on this, the way the whole system has been set up. I think I mentioned, we're having training coming in for the complete staff, I think on January 31st, and then another day follow up in February. My Senior Center has made a lot of improvements over the past 2 years, productivity wise. So we're going to focus on using those productivity tools and also setting it up so that we can collect the data better. The John Sasso, the spreadsheet you sent is great. And I think any decision that's going to be made by the town is going to be data driven. So we'll be able to populate that and provide information on what we can't do and what we need to do it better.
Question, Kevin.
Yeah.
On the data here. Unduplicated counts are hard. And I think I have a basic understanding of the system that's generated this information. But across different programs, to get a true unduplicated number, I know is usually the hardest thing to do. How is that? Is that handled somehow or other, some magic way?
I believe the system can drive down and get that information. Again, I just did some summary reports.
Right, not like I meant, like somebody took a meal and also went to one of the events.
That would be broken up. When people walk into the center, they have a key card, so they can scan themselves in, and then they hit on the touch screen which activities they're going to. So if they showed up for, you know, some type of an event, again, it would be divided up. If they were there for Zumba, then they were going to a Shine appointment, and they were staying for lunch. Other reports would divide those all up. So, you know, we can get to that. But the duplicated are the total numbers.
Right. So
if you're looking at the events, in 2019, there were 12,168 different events. That's 656 different people participated in. Does that make sense to folks?
No, I understand that. My question was more the events 656 and the service is 613. In my experience, that would include some of the same people.
It could, but they took advantage of an event and a service.
Right.
On that same day.
No. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand it. I'm not questioning
Yep.
the validity of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I think the big takeaway from all of these slides are the drastic numbers between 2019, which was pre-COVID. The numbers are much, much higher. The 3 months in 2020, January, February, March, when we were open, numbers dropped, and then again in the 6 months of 2021. So again, without driving down too much into those, here's another one again, 2019, 2020, 2021. Again, in 2020, 2021, we're not doing any lunch, any congregate meals. Again, since we've opened, we're limited by several different things. By the size of the building, we had to institute limits. Everybody they have to make reservations to participate in the program. And we've set limits so that we can socially distance people during those activities. And so that we didn't have, in the past, we had, as soon as one event was done, we had another event starting. In order to keep people, again, socially distanced, we only have one way in, one way out of the building. We've had to space activities out, so we obviously can't have as many activities going on at the same time. So that's, again, limited our programming capability at the center. This is a pretty good snapshot of just the attendance, who's come in the building by day and month. Excuse me. You can see in 2019, average 48 a day. The first 3 months of 2021, almost 51 a day, and right now we have around 22 a day coming in.
What is the square footage, Kevin? Do you know?
I think it's around 5,500, around 5,500 square feet. It's in the report somewhere, between 5,500 and 6,000 square feet. I walked from the town hall to the center today, and as I walked over, I looked up, and there was a marker on the building, and it was built in 1881 or somewhere around there. So the building's about 140 years old, and then there was some really nice benches that the Public Works facilities just put on, and the building was used for about 90 years as the fire station, police station, and then 30 years as the senior center. And, I thought about the staff has done an awful lot with what they've had to work with over the years. So it's, the building has been very well maintained, and again, utilized for what it is. So people have done a great job over the years, making do with what they have. And for those that didn't hear, the Board of Health this past Monday did institute a mask mandate for the Pleasant Street Center. We've constantly been trying to encouraged people to wear masks, but weren't always successful. And we know that people weren't coming because people were not wearing masks. So that may scare a few people away, but again, we want to make as many people comfortable as possible. So I was happy that the Board of Health did pass that mandate on Monday night. And as John mentioned earlier, we have a nurse advocate and a senior caseworker. And the work that they do is above and beyond everything that happens at the Pleasant Street Center. They've worked an awful lot with the school department during the past two years, again, since I've been there, dealing with food insecurity, dealing with mental health issues, you name it, every day is an adventure.
And they're not just dealing with older people, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Is there any breakdown as far as age?
The system does have the capability. You can set filters. I didn't have a chance to do that, but I can get that in the future.
Because I just was noting that because of looking at a broader population, that we're looking hopefully to serve. This is an area where we're already providing some of that service. So these people would be valuable, I think, as far as us talking to them as a group at some point.
And these two people work very, very closely with the police department and the fire department on all kinds of different issues, wellness calls. Again, with collaboration, we had a meeting with the library staff, I think 2 weeks ago. Again, how to deal with issues that the library doesn't have a whole lot of experience with. And again, we had police and fire at that meeting and talked about some different protocols on how to deal with issues. I think mostly with the elderly that the library staff didn't have experience with. And we work quite a bit with the library as well. We advertise their programs. They advertise a lot of our programs as far as book groups, having, well, not since COVID, but we have pickups available at the library for books. So again, we work closely with them.
They work a lot with the clergy too.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Any questions on the numbers? Again, they're quick snapshots, but it shows the difference between the 3 years, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So the current data, unfortunately, doesn't represent what the actual need or wants might be.
Kevin, do you know if other communities might be using a similar tracking system, and if we might be able to understand their data a little bit also? I'm wondering a bunch of different things. One would be kind of, what percentage of the population is utilizing some of the services at different centers, things like that. Measurements of people coming from outside of the community to those locations. Those might be really interesting to take a look at also.
Yeah, this is a very popular program. So at least half the centers in the state are using this program, and it's a national program. And the owner's mother is actually a volunteer in our center. So, and he lives in Acton, which is right next door to where I live. So, and I think I know him back from when I was coaching baseball. So, I think we're going to get a lot of training and assistance with collecting any data that we might need. So, once we know some metrics, I can always send out requests and ask people to provide information to us.
Any other questions of Kevin as far as any of the data? Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
All right, and this is the last, what if? What doesn't the space allow? These are just a few things that I came up with. And I think probably the biggest one is the area for socialization, an area where people can drop in any time of day, no matter what different programs are going on. Quality lunch program, no question. That's part of the socialization. Multiple activities going on at the same time. Right now, we really only have one really good room to work with. Once an activity is done, we have to break it down and move on to the next, whatever the setup is, whether it's for yoga or Tai Chi or bingo. It's one big multi-purpose room. I think I mentioned earlier the exercise, the floor. Having something that's not quite as tough on the joints will be a big help. I showed the picture of the dedicated exercise room, a game room where the tables can be set up and people can come in one after another. A supportive daycare. A handful of centers have a supportive daycare. They're not necessarily licensed workers, but it's a chance for seniors to come in and to have caregivers that need a break. Because let me tell you, caregivers need breaks. I can speak from experience. And this could be a few centers, this pays for itself. It can be a revenue stream where people do pay to have their parents or whoever come in, and that can pay for the staff and whatever services might be provided during the day. Private meeting space. I wish we had more to give Betty that space, several years ago when she offered her services. Right now, there is none. We're using the computer room right now for Shine appointments downstairs. Specified craft area, fix-it shops, model building. These are just a few things that other centers are doing. A ping pong area, great for people to get exercise. Again, it could be a drop-in type of thing.
I know a number of communities having a podiatrist come in.
Yep.
Is very popular.
Kind of the next thing, dedicated area for hairdressing, manicures, and other self-care services, like you said, Mike, a podiatrist. And then lastly, the dedicated private office space for staff. Where can they meet and collaborate? These are all things that I think would make the operation that much more efficient. Any questions?
Kevin, this is kind of an accumulation of things that you've seen and heard, just put down on paper at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
But this
And like Mark, like you said, there's so much more out there from talking to other centers, visiting other centers. There's so much out there to learn. I think before as we move on, what is our vision of what the next reincarnation could be? Is it a senior center? Is it a multi-generational center? I think part of our job is to help define what to ask.
Yeah, and if I could just add, we're not the only community that either has faced into this or is facing into this, right? I mean, there's lots and lots of experience out there. I think that's what we need to tap into as part of our exploration, is to really kind of understand what that is, figure out what we think would make the most sense, and kind of then engage the community in that discussion. And people don't, we talked about this, I think, early on, or maybe Gene, Kevin, you and three of us talked a little bit about it. People don't necessarily know exactly what they want. So if you just say to them, what do you want?
right.
You don't get a picture of kind of where we need to be. They may not have any idea. And yeah, we'll get the same kinds of answers that we have. I think we need to understand kind of what will make for that community center, what that opportunity is. what we want and need to do in Reading. And there may be ways that things can get shared across communities. Don't know, maybe. The intergenerational aspect, as Kevin, you brought up also, and John, how can that impact things in a positive way? Or if people say, no, don't, no interest. I think that's really what this group can help to assess, and then share more and more of that with the community, and then get the community engaged in that whole discussion.
Yeah, I agree. My experience has been with, if you ask people open-ended questions and they don't have they haven't thought about it. But then if you say, well, so we're going to do this, the X, Y, and Z, and say, oh, no, not that. And then it stimulates their thinking. So here, I think it would be a menu. And then you can prioritize. People tell you what's most important to them. And then we'd be better at, to get back to, circle back to what John Sasso was looking at with his spreadsheet. You don't know until you know what the demand is for some of these things. And what are some of the activities that people really want to see? And how much would they expand? And at this point, I believe that we're still at the point at saying, let's not think small, let's think big. What people would really like to see. We're going to have to get practical at some point, and we're going to have to prioritize, and we can't have unlimited space for everything that people would like to do. But we don't want to do that at the beginning of the process, limit ourselves to some things that, just because they aren't being done now, maybe things people value highly, that even in the list that Kevin, there may be other things that people say, oh, wow, I really would like to have a place where we could play bridge. I don't know, whatever it might be.
Kevin, in some of those other facilities that you visited, were they all indoor, or were there outdoor activities as well too?
Yes, both. We found out last summer, we put a tent on the patio at the Pleasant Street Center. And the patio was used more in the past 6 months than I think I ever saw people out there prior to that. And I know some other centers have areas outside where fresh air is a good thing. So yes, to take advantage of both
Obviously,
aspects.
we know about the surge in pickleball among people
Yes, yeah,
in our age, but it's true. It's huge, and it seems to be something that's growing. That's why I was asking about the outdoor activities a little bit as well too.
See, I think Mike maybe could talk to this. Is that I've thought of pickleball too, because I know it is very popular, and something that would seem to be perfect to do in conjunction with the recreation department.
Yep.
And maybe expand the times at which some of the things at the recreation offers that might be more conducive to different age groups. Evening's going to be fine for younger populations, older people, especially like there's still a lot of people. I'm finding myself more often. I'm not thrilled about going out at night, driving at night in the winter. So, but there's no reason why they can, if you had activities, during the daytime, then anyway, there are a lot of things that are possible, and maybe having skating lessons, ice skating lessons. We got the bourbon. Once you start thinking, there are just so many things that ballroom dancing. How many older people love to dance?
Yeah. It's interesting, Mark. You said, what do people want? So I did the test with my mom yesterday, right? Because I was having this meeting. Mom, what is it that you would really like? And Mike, the pictures that you shared were great. Just a place to socialize and things like that. But dancing and music, a 92-year-old woman, but dancing and music is something she really wanted. She
Yeah.
thought that was something that could be offered. And there's nothing like music and everything else to get people up and going a little bit. It doesn't have to be, exercise or Zumba or something like that, but just that social aspect of dance lessons.
The dancing, you have to go up to Chelmsford to the senior center there.
Yeah.
They have that there?
Yes, they did before.
Again, we can't wait to get back to special events. We had special meals, St. Patrick's Day, and, we probably did a half a dozen. And we have musicians come in, and once they get advertised in the pleasantries, they fill up in an
Minutes.
hour in the morning. Again, we can only bring about 60 people inside to the great room.
Michael,
So-
did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. Pickleball got mentioned. There's lots of activities. The rec department does, has pickleball activities, but it's mostly in the evenings, because the facilities that you need to use this are at schools, and they're all used during the day. Wakefield has pickleball during the, most mornings, in their AmeriCall Center. I don't know whether that's their senior center or what it is, but so there's a lot of demand for all sorts of things all the time. In the summer, it's spring and fall, it's a lot easier because you can get outside and do a lot of things outside that don't take the dedicated space. But dancing, there was a dance group that used the Pleasant Street Center, but that's hard to do. That's a schedule challenge.
On a concrete floor as well, right? Very
Yeah,
very good in the knees.
not great.
Any other?
Just a quick question at this point. So I think the list, especially the needs or wants, is great. I'm just wondering, at this point, is it worth kind of collecting up as much of the information we have? Gene, is this something that would be useful to have for input to the survey, in terms of giving, this is one of the areas we want to ask about is programmatics. Must-haves, nice-to-haves, don't really care. These are other things. It seems like there's a fair amount of information here that we can use to provide as input. Again, I was thinking that was one of the things we would do as part of this group, is to, put together some supporting materials that could then be provided to the group that would be doing the survey for us, and let them help us establish what those questions should be and how to pose them, but certainly give them the information. And then the second point, just to finish the thought, is again, this is the type of list I was hoping that we would have, because I still think it's worth putting this onto I guess I'll call it a detailed spreadsheet for the moment. Even though we don't necessarily have specific information on a lot of this stuff, I think we can start to flesh out, well, what are the types of things these things would require, and update it over time, because I think ultimately what we want in the end is a assessment of what do all these programs and services and needs drive in terms of space. So ultimately, we have to get there. If the survey tells us that there's something critical and it takes 1,000 feet of space, no matter when you do it or where you do it, then we need to know that. But I think these kind of serve to feed both ends of it, if you will. So I guess I'm just asking the question: how do we take what we've talked about here and provide it back to Gene in a format that can be useful for the consultant to digest and potentially give us some good input on the survey, and at the same time begin to flush that out a bit more amongst ourselves and the seniors, the elder services and the COA, to help us get some at least initial ideas of what these things might might require. And then again, as I said, update that over time. So those are two thoughts I had.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to work through with the consultant what the survey will look like. So we can put a pin in that. There's also going to be multiple public forums, and there's going to be focus groups and other opportunities for the public to engage, for the people who are, just like in the needs assessment, the focus groups were a big part of what we learned from that study. And we were able to sit with groups of people to hear, for those people that are involved with the current activities and the current programming and the current services that we provide to this demographic, what do they think is important? And I think we will get a lot of good data and a lot of good feedback from this process, even though it does take some additional time to go through it and engage with the community. I think it's well worthwhile. We just went through a similar process with the zoning at the downtown Smart Growth District, and we got a lot of valuable information, and over 1,000 people responded to our survey. So we did it a couple months ago, and I'm looking forward to doing it again for this.
Hey, Jean, just the process of working with the consultant. Do we get a session to sit down with them to do the brainstorming of all the things we've talked about ahead of time? And then he comes back, and he or she comes back and does their sort of, here's where I think we should go. But are they, besides the multiple forms you talked about, but are they talking to the committee first to find out how we've thought about this?
Yep, I have them budgeted on the scope for coming to a few recalc meetings.
Okay.
So however that works, that's baked into the scope of services.
Okay.
I have a
Can I
question.
chime in? Oh, go ahead, John.
All right, who is? Oh, that's Ron again.
That was Mark.
Oh, Mark. Okay, Mark.
Was I interrupting you though, John? I'm sorry. If I
No,
was.
that's fine. No, I'm supposed to be facilitating, not.
No, you get to contribute too. So two questions, two thoughts. One is, so all this sounds great, first of all. Question related to that for John Parsons and for Kevin. Is there a way that we might be able to leverage the Council on Aging to help with some of these activities also, in terms of either working through information we have? Many of you have already traveled to different senior centers. In other words, how do we capture that information? Or if there's more that we want, kind of, I'll call it outside information, is there a way that we can capture that and kind of have the council help us out with that? I'm just thinking of that as another source, because I think that's one of the inputs I want to make sure that we get also. Obviously, community input is critical. And what you laid out though, Kevin, I think some of that stuff to get more detail, to understand what's where, how it's working, would be great. And if we need more resources, maybe the council could be used for that. That actually kind of brought both of my points together into one. Sorry.
Okay. And what I was going to say was getting back to John Sasso. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to just say that or I would like to request from John Parsons and maybe Kevin that John, you mentioned early on in the meeting that Council on Aging says to get out of the building, I think was the phrase. And I would love to hear what the Council on Aging thinks about location in town. Is it important to be in the downtown district? And what all are their thoughts and along those lines? And that doesn't have to be right today, but that's something that I think we need to find out.
And we can invite a few council members, so we don't end up with a quorum, to maybe one of our recalc meetings. John Parsons, any?
I think we could count on a certain amount of people to be able to help. Some people on the council are not retired as I am, so they've got jobs and a lot of other commitments. But I would see us being able to get a certain amount of help. And the location is a good question. And unfortunately, we don't meet this month. January and July are the 2 months the council doesn't meet, so we won't be meeting again till early February. So I can't bring any of that in, any of those questions until up at the council till then.
But following up on, the point previous, but it would be good for us to meet with members of the council, right? Well, we have you, John, and then is Betty on the council, or she just?
No,
No, she isn't. Okay. So it would be good if we could, have a meeting and invite whatever members could go and get to hear from them directly.
I think as Kevin pointed out, we just have to be careful there wasn't a quorum, because that could create some type of an issue, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right.
But just quick option on that. One of the good considered John O'Neill calling a joint meeting
Hmm.
and then inviting a quorum. Oh,
Okay.
thanks, Gene. Great minds.
Or inviting this committee to our meeting. Either way.
Right. Well, let's do a vote. Let's say, like, formally, do we want to have a joint meeting? And I'll do a roll call with the council on aging, because I think a joint meeting is what I was kind of like seeing it would, as the best vehicle, because sometimes rather than, at whose house is it being held sort of thing. This way, if it's a joint meeting, I think people feel like, all right, we each have, the weight is equal as far as what people's input is. Hopefully that's the way it would be viewed. So will somebody make that motion that we?
So moved.
I moved.
Mark's moved. Do we have a second?
I'll
Michael?
second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, a call for a roll call vote. Okay. John Parsons,
Yes.
Michael Coltman,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
John O'Neill, yes. John Sasso,
Yes.
and Ron.
Oh, you muted, Ron.
Trying to type at the same time. Yes.
Okay, so the vote is unanimous. So we will do that, and we'll look to, what do people think? Waiting until February, or? Because by then too, we would have the consultant, hopefully. That might
be fine.
Yeah, I'm thinking that would probably be a good thing to have right from the beginning, that everybody has a chance. Well, everybody from the two committees has a chance to
So
pick up.
our the next Council on Aging meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 14th of February.
Valentine's Day.
It is, yeah.
And what time is that meeting?
6:30 is when it's typically scheduled.
How is people's schedule as far as Mondays? Well, first of all, we're assuming that it's going to be okay with the council, that they want to have the joint meeting. And all right, what the politics of this is, if they have to decide before they meet whether they want that to be the joint meeting. So that's probably not going to be the time for the joint meeting, is what I'm thinking anyway. What is that? Anybody else?
So
Mark?
one thing that could happen is the question could be asked to the chair of the council, and the chair of the council could decide to call a joint meeting, either on that date or a different one. And maybe give an outline of what we're hoping to accomplish. And if the chair thinks it's a good idea, then the chair has the power to call a meeting whenever, as long as you give sufficient notice.
Right, Kevin, could you make that approach?
I can approach Marilyn. I mean, do we want to give a time frame? Our next meeting is scheduled for, I think, January 12th. Is that too soon to bring them in, or do we want to do it, potentially if we schedule every 2 weeks, the 26th of January?
Well, But how about my point about waiting until we have a consultant or no? What do people think as far as that time wise? Should we have them in before we have the consultant or the joint meeting?
Why not both? Why not before and after?
Okay,
The problem is I'm only going to have so many meetings with the consultant in the budget. So from a budgeting point of view, it'd be most efficient to have one meeting joint.
no,
with the
no,
consultant.
right. No, I don't think that was what John Parsons was thinking. I think he was talking about our meeting with the
Yes.
council, right?
Yes,
Right. So,
exactly.
right. So, all right. Why don't we contact and maybe for not the next meeting, but we'll see what might be appropriate. Contact him.
I'll get a hold of Marilyn.
Okay. I said, already have one meeting scheduled. Before we end this meeting today, hopefully we'll have a second meeting scheduled. That will give them some, two options where they can decide if one is preferable to the other as far as the joint. And we'll need to know that though before we set an agenda for our next meeting so that it can be posted and everything. Okay.
I think we also just need, I think someone already mentioned it, we need to be clear about what our agenda with them would be. What specifically are we going to discuss? What questions do we want to ask? What feedback are we looking for? I mean, I'm not sure we have all of that in our heads just yet, but I think that would be important to solidify so that they know, okay, we're going to call a meeting. Well, what are we going to talk about? So as much as we'd like to meet with them and pick their brains, I think we should have at least an outline of what things we want to talk to them about.
So that would lead us to say that we don't want to do it for the next meeting because the next meeting first of all, we probably need to take time. We've already have one question anyway that's been identified, and that is location. Is being near downtown crucial? I think that's a basic question that we do want to hear from them on that, but there are other things as well. So why don't we say that will be an agenda item for our next meeting, that we will think in terms of what do we specifically want to address or have come out of the meeting, a joint meeting with the Council on Aging.
I think that's a good idea to have as an agenda item for us next time to talk about and for folks to come prepared with potential items to add to that list.
Okay. And if I don't see any objection, I don't see anybody. Okay, so that's what I'll include it as an agenda item for our next scheduled meeting. So we can do that. And not to forget John Sasso's point as far as that spreadsheet. Is it possible, first of all, Kevin, the square footage of each of the rooms at the current center?
Easy.
And then what activities are in what room, because then that will tell us, and then, and this is, you can tell me if it's too big an ask, can we get information as far as programs that go on at other centers, how much space is utilized, to give us some better idea of what it would take?
There are a ton of feasibility studies out there that work has already been done on what people, the same thing. What did they have before? What do they have now? So that's all out there. It'll obviously take time to gather it and parse it, but it's all out there.
Okay. Yes, Ron.
And perhaps this is in the study. I guess the biggest thing that I've been thinking about are the demographics as well too of the town. There, 1959, the year I was born, was the peak of the baby boomers. So we have to understand what the demographics are. And was that in the study? I don't remember. If it
They
was or
did
not.
talk about what the population was going to be in 2030, I believe.
30.
But the number one year for the baby boom was actually 47. That more babies were born. in 1947, even then in 46, which was the first year of the baby boom.
Yeah.
I happen to know that because that was my year.
Okay.
So that when I learned that, I said, oh, I was part of a big, the boom within the boom.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a percentage or the actual number. So anyhow, that it's the middle of, you know, folks my age and older is going to be a huge population in the town, I'm sure. And
There's a demographic chart or two in the report.
okay.
Whether it's completely up to date as of today or not is another, probably not, but certainly I think it showed good projections.
Yeah, I think
does
we're
some of that
actually
come out of the
ahead.
census report as well too, the 2020 census? Would that be in there as well too?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're ahead of the projections, aren't we, in terms of percentage of population 60 plus in town?
I believe we were, when I got the information from Laura Gem a couple months ago.
Yeah, I think it's faster than that last study had suggested. But I mean, you're spot on, Ron. To, you know, what do the projections look like? It's a substantial proportion of the population.
And they usually use 2030, Ron, because that's when they figure that the peak is going to be as far as the 65 plus population. But you're right. I mean, the big demographic is the 55 plus.
Yep.
That's really where it's at. And I think we need to be cognizant of that, you know, in the planning process, that you're going to have a group that's going to be more, all the studies show it's going to be more active, more demanding. Their expectations for public services are going to be higher, and they're going to be less homogeneous population, elder population, than we've ever seen too. You're already seeing that reflected as Reading is slowly changing as far as, you know, diversity as well. So it's a lot is happening that as we look at what the needs are today, we have to be, you know, also focused on where things are going, where all the trends are going. And so I think it's going to be very important in some of these, and working with the consultants, that some of this, when we get data for people who aren't elderly today, even if it, you know, the Center for Active Living, our charge is not just for, you know, seniors anyway, but within whatever Center for Activities of Daily Living, there's going to be activities that are going to be primarily addressing, you know, seniors, but it's going to be a senior population that's changing. The dynamic is going to be a bit different. So we're going to have to be taking a look at that. Okay. Anything? I'm not one of those people that believes that because you have a meeting scheduled from 4 to 6 that you have to go to 6. What I would like, two things I wanted to accomplish though, is that, well, I did say non-elders. I don't know, do we want to start taking a look at that, having that brainstorming discussion today? Are people ready, prepared to do that, or do they want to defer that? I could go either way, clearly.
John, when you say non-elders, how low are you thinking? How are we talking the multi-generational aspect of things, or are we talking about people under 60, or what are you thinking?
I was thinking people under 60, but, well, not really. I was thinking because there are certain age groups that, because of where they are as far as their business, family status, that kind of thing, you know, young kids, it's going to be kind of a different dynamic. And I know there's a lot of things going on for teenagers vis-a-vis the high school, and there's a big need there as well. So I think we have to be open to the whole. If we have a center, a public building, why not use it all out, you know, as much as possible? And so rather than say it's for this population and not that population, I'd say I'd open it up and try to get as wide an input from the various people who live in Reading, because sometimes people may have ideas for, for other members of the community. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, I think they would like, as opposed to I really would like. So I would really want to get as much input from everybody as possible. Okay. So so I guess the question is, do we want to begin that, or are we kind of late in the meeting to begin that discussion? The two things I wanted to get done was that, do we want to set, so that might help inform people's response to that question, is a second meeting in January and agenda items for the next meeting. We already have one agenda item for the next meeting, and that is what we want to be looking for from the meeting with the Council on Aging. So that's one. But so before this meeting closes, those are the two things I want to iron out. So, but the issue before us is we have an agenda item on thoughts on service needs of non-elders. Have people given that? If people have, given some thought to that, this certainly would be open to beginning the discussion now, realizing there's a lot that can be done there. And yes, Michael.
So I've thought about this a fair bit from the recreation perspective, and I think it's really important to include all adults. That we in recreation there's sort of two demographics. There's kids, and there's a lot of programming for kids recreation activities, and the other demographic is adults, and there's programming for adults, not as much, but it's a very important aspect. And I think with this the Center for Active Living, I think it's important to bring in people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, to make sure that they're still active when they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So if it's a continuum, and I don't think that we should just focus on the 65 plus or 60 plus. But it is also to get people comfortable with going to a center, you have to make the programs something that they're going to want before they need them.
Right.
So get them used to the place before
That's one of my big, has been one of my big, beliefs, is that, yes, get them comfortable with the place before it actually, they not only need it, but there's something that the programs, they don't have a stigma. That, okay, this is a community center. And a lot of it's, I think, like, information is going to be one of the things. Pre-retirement needs to start, in your 20s and 30s. And I can't tell you how many people, including younger siblings of mine, of whom I have 6, as far as issues around, geez, what is Medicare all about? What do I need to know? What are the advice as far as Social Security? I mean, there was just, healthcare. They take care of that at work, don't they? You mean I'm not going to have any dental care with Medicare? There's just, there is just so much good stuff that we could be doing for the community. Some of which goes on now, but people don't even have the question, don't even know the questions to ask.
Yep.
Can I?
Yes, okay, I have a whole bunch of hands here. I'll go Mark, then Ron, then John Sasso. Okay, Mark.
Thanks, John. Would it be helpful to us to invite in a guest speaker or two, maybe from a community that has recently gone through the planning process and thought about some of the issues that we're poking at, and just hear from them kind of, what information they gathered, where they got it from, how they dealt with some of these questions, how they defined the scope in some sense, of kind of what they're going to work on, how long the process has taken, what their next steps are. I know that, so Kevin, you had connected us briefly with the select board member in North Reading?
North Reading.
North Reading. And maybe if we could find someone in a community where they've developed a multi-generational center, and one not, and kind of hear from them, and maybe that'll help us in structure our thinking. I'm a little concerned that if we kind of go completely out wide, we're not going to be able to come back in for quite a while, and maybe we can get some guidance.
Okay.
I mean, Newton just went through this and did an amazing job. And I think they were up in the air on what they wanted to do originally, and I believe they've settled on a community center
Where was that? I'm sorry, Kevin.
in Newton.
Newton. Okay.
Yeah, they haven't built it yet, but I think they're in the design process of the actual facility right now.
Well, to Mark's point, could you contact someone there and just sound them out as far as would they be willing to?
I can give it a go, sure.
Okay. And then one that wound up having a process, to Mark's point, that wound up just deciding to go with a senior center. Okay, then getting back to Ron.
Maybe this is for Kevin. Kevin, does the current senior center program work with the high school to incorporate high school and elderly together? So there are things that, I know high school students have to do a lot of volunteer work and things like that.
We do. We have a lot of students coming in doing community service. We had them doing bingo calling. They help with some of the gardening. They do a lot of, again, a lot of things were pre-COVID, a lot of snow shoveling, yard cleanup. Again, a lot of them get community service hours for doing a lot of these activities.
Okay. Right, just if there's a multi-generational center that's open up, then that could be expanded greatly as well too. So.
Absolutely.
John Sasso?
So just two quick points. One is I agree with Mark. I think it's important that we be careful about how wide and far we go. Not that I don't want to give us the opportunity to have the discussion, but we should just consider that as what our focus should be. But on that same line, though, I think the fact that we've already, in some respect, recast this into a center for active living. I was just thinking of the example of let's say there is an exercise space in the new center, and it's used primarily during the day for seniors for their particular programs. But in the late afternoons and early evenings, that space can actually be used by other groups, other age groups, for either similar or somewhat different programming, but maybe still exercise related. I guess the point is to remove, I heard someone say this earlier, remove the stigma about going to the senior center, but okay, we're just going to the Center for Active Living because this is where these classes are held. And so I think part of it is actually that breaking down those barriers and having the partnerships with, Reading Rec, I'll use that as the example where, in Reading Rec, you see, okay, well, this class is offered at the Parker Middle School gym for men's basketball, and this one's offered at the Y, and this is done at the high school, and this is done at the Center for Active Living. And I think the answer is that we by doing that in and of itself, we kind of accomplish that goal a bit more, and that we, really, and this is also why I also get concerned, is like this also opens up a much broader issue within the town of how do we, really drag people into involvement in different activities, not just from a Center for Active Living, but in general with all the things that we as a community do. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I think the idea of, focusing on the needs that we have for this particular center to address the senior issues should be our priority. But if as a result of that, we get some multi-use pieces out of it that serve to support those other things and then help us also serve as a transition to say, okay, yeah, I'm just going to the Center for Active Living for a different program. I think that kind of tears that wall down. So just my thoughts. I think we got to be careful about, trying to make it too broad, but at the same time, recognizing that there's going to be some dual use and expansion of those programs if we think about this correctly.
The only caveat there would be is that if we don't, first of all, our charge is broader. Our charge is to take a look at a Center for Active Living. And so it's not just restricted to the senior population. I do agree, certainly, since I've raised the point, a couple of times already as far as the stigma issue and the fact that if you have these, facilities, but equipment and facilities and that kind of a thing, then it takes care of itself in one way because then you can open it up to other populations. But unless you have that design in mind from the outset, other populations, you may not think big enough as far as what that facility is going to look like. That's my caveat. So I hear, both Mark's point and John's point as far as, we don't want to be too broad. But on the other hand, we're just at the beginning. I mean, you can always, narrow things. We're going to have to, it's going to be, there's no question we're going to narrow it down because there are going to be space limitations no matter what the design is. There are going to be financial, restrictions. I mean, so there's, but we don't want people that to get, my only concern is that we get too practical too soon.
Let me just add one other caveat to that. And I didn't put this on my spreadsheet, but I had thought about this, is that on each of those, at the end of the day, each of the line items are going to give us some estimates for space and the types of things that are needed. I was going to add another column to the sheet that said dual use or multi-use. What would the other uses be potentially as a way to allow us to think about that? To your point, John, I think if you don't kind of upfront at least have some sort of a concept, yes, you're right. We could create something that we could then never use for something else. But I think there's probably a fair amount in the things that we've already outlined that will have some dual use potentials, whether they're exactly targeted to a particular age group or not. I think that's probably worth having that discussion.
Okay. Mark.
Thanks, John. And just to add another kind of bullet point to the same discussion, there, depending on kind of where we feel has the best way to kind of take care of the community, with a focus on 60 plus, but the community, that does open up the possibility of kind of bringing in, I'm going to call it the school-aged community for a moment also in terms of participation here. And right now, they don't have a representative per se on this group, which is not to say that, we certainly are going to want their input. We're going to need their input. But the structure was to kind of, let's get our bearings first. Let's figure out kind of where we're thinking it's going and gather input from other people as we want it. As we're reaching out to the community, that's a big chunk of it. And it may be that we also at some point want to get more, more of this, I'm going to call it school community for a moment, engaged with us also, in terms of whether it's the dual use side of things or, maybe even a little bit broader saying, hey, great, you want to do that, but if it was an extra 1,000 square feet, here are all the other things you could do with it, for example.
Okay, any other thoughts or people thinking we've gone far as we want to go or can go at the moment on as far as the other populations. Okay, seeing, all right, so why don't we bookmark that and maybe continue it by saying, are there specific agenda items now, including a follow-up to this discussion, that we want to have for the next meeting? We have that, the one item as far as the Council on Aging, but what other things? You don't have, we don't have to finish the agenda today, but I know sometimes when you're not a captured audience, Ron.
Do we have a target date to select the consultant? Because that's pretty important to nail that down so we know what our time frame is.
Yeah, the RFP says January 24th. Well, I should say January 24th is the due date for responses to the invitation for bids.
Is that what you were talking about, Ron?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other suggestions? So please, within the next week or so, if you have, and we can always add it to the list of for Kevin. I mean, his list is like unbelievable. I'm feeling a little bit guilty, not tremendously guilty, but a little bit guilty. Also,
So can I just real quick because I agree. I don't want to just keep throwing things on top of Kevin here. As part of what we just went through today, Kevin, please feel free to, forward any of the rest of those information. I'd like to, keep working on that spreadsheet and start to put some things together. And I'm happy to, take the time to do some of that digging as well. And if you just give me the raw data or whatever you have, I can, or point me to places where I can look. I can do a little bit of homework on that as well.
Okay,
So
you can do.
I think, I want to make sure, John, we have some good homework out of this as well, so we can keep making some progress. So I'm happy to do little pieces when I can.
Okay, thanks, John.
and feel free, Kevin, through me, you could, if there are some specific things that you think members of the committee could be helpful as far as gathering information, please let me know.
Will do.
Okay. All right. So we have a next scheduled meeting on January 12th. We have a couple of agenda items. Hopefully people will may come up with more. And meanwhile, I will contact Betty. I haven't forgotten about that. We'll see how that goes. And then finally, we want to set another meeting towards the end of January. People, we have, so this was like 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now would be the 26th. That's a Wednesday. Have to be in the evening for Mark's schedule. So let's say 7 o'clock again, because that's what it's going to be on the 12th. What does the 26th at 7 o'clock look like? Okay, thumbs up, John Sasso. The other John Parsons? John Parsons, you still with us? If he is, he's muted.
I was holding my thumb up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. So we'll book that one. So the 26th at 7 o'clock.
I think that would be a 7 o'clock meeting works well for the people on the council if that's when we try to have a joint meeting.
Great.
Due to some of the working schedules those people may have.
Okay. Very good. If there isn't any other business before us, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
And second, do we have to have a roll call on this, Mark? We do.
Everything.
Okay. All right. So we'll say Ron Assini. On the motion to adjourn.
Yes, please.
Okay, Michael Coltman,
Yes, please.
Mark Doxer,
Absolutely.
John Parsons,
Yes.
and John Sasso,
Yes.
and Sean O'Neill, most definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
all.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
folks.
Yeah,
You know,
good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Here.
Another Zoom meeting, because until we get through the worst of this Omicron, I think we need to
Yep.
do that, okay?
Hey, just final question. Where do I send the notes to? Where do I send the notes to? You, John, or?
You can send them to me, Ron,
Okay, okay.
and I'll keep them for the next package.
All right.
And I will send up the approved meetings from last month's, no, was it last month? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'll send those to the town clerk, so those will be part of the official minutes.
But then, Kevin, will you submit the draft to everybody to make sure that's how it worked, right?
Correct. And once they're voted on, they become the final minutes.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you.
Bye.
John.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Yep, bye.
Oh, dear.